I fell asleep while putting the kids down tonight. Okay, let's do this. What's going on, everyone? Marty here at Par Extreme, and welcome back to was that too much? Another video on my Backpacking for Beginners series, where I take you on a step-by-step journey and give you a blueprint of everything you need to know and everything you need to do so you are successful on your first backpacking trip. We're already on episode 5, and I've made a decision to finish this off with a 6th episode, so make sure to stay tuned with next week's episode. But if you missed the first 4 already, make sure to check those out. I'll leave a playlist up here in the cards, also in the description below. If you're new to the channel, my name is Marty, and here at Par Extreme, I cover all things outdoor. So if that interests you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on anything. And this week is a huge week for us, because officially our provincial parks here in Quebec are finally opening and allowing us to backcountry camp. So this coming weekend, we're actually going on a 4-day canoe camping trip. I'm super excited. I can't wait to go out. And what I was going to do this week is actually cover a couple of skills that I believe you really need to know before you go on your first backpacking trip. But since I'll be out on the trail next weekend, I'll show you those skills when I'm at camp. I'll take some times to do some videos out there for you guys. It'll be way more interesting than in my basement here. So stay tuned for that. In today's video, I'm actually going to show you how to prep for your first backpacking trip. So let's dive in. Also, actually, before we get started, if you didn't get your hand on my free backpacking gear checklist, go to parextreme.com and get your hand on that free backpacking gear checklist. It's for you, and it's going to be super useful to make sure that you don't forget anything on your first backpacking trip. All right, first thing first, when it comes down to prepping your trip, it takes years to master and to be very efficient at knowing how many miles you can put in or how many kilometers you can hike every day. What's your elevation gain that you can do with the amount of weight that you have on your pack, and how far can you go, and what if it rains, and what if it's way too hot, or what if it's way too cold. Let me tell you, it's not a simple process to learn to be efficient and to be good at prepping your trips, but it is something that you have to start somewhere. So I'm going to give you guys the basics today of what I kind of look for, and after that, from there, you guys are just going to have to go ahead and try it and do some iteration and basically go out on the field and readjust, and really try every time you go out on the trail to have a post-trail talk with yourself, or take 30 minutes, or most people, when they come out of the trail, at least for me, the first thing I do, I go for beer and a burger. I can't get out of the trail without a beer and a burger after spending a couple of days out in the backcountry. And while you're out there, especially if you go out with other people, take the time to talk about the trip. What went well? What didn't go well? How could we have done better? What were some of the obstacles we were faced with? Because that's all the knowledge that you need for yourself to be able to prep better trips for you. If I can give you guys a pro tip, the first thing I'll tell you is make sure to undershoot your first backpacking trip. It's easy to think that you're stronger than everyone else and you can go as far as you want, you can put in all the miles. Listen, there's a lot to learn out on the trail that has to do with other skills than your fitness level. So what I really recommend is, for the first couple of trips, undershoot. The first thing obviously you're gonna need to know before we go out on the trail is you're gonna have to figure out where you're gonna go backpacking. Is it gonna be in a provincial park, in a state park, national park? Is it just gonna be a trail? Wherever you decide to go, just look around where are, the attractions around you for backpacking, pick a trail, and once you have that location, what I personally do myself is I go on the website of either that trail association, or I go on the website of the provincial park or the state park, and I get my hand on the actual physical map. It's super nice to kind of look at all the options on an actual real map. Plus, for safety's sake, you're going to want to carry this in your backpack, as I've told you already. And then after that, since you're a beginner, what I really recommend is talk with the people at the front office there. Let them know that, hey, it's my first time backpacking. It's going to be an introductory for me. What do you recommend? And try to at least get a feel as to what they themselves recommend new backpackers to the area, but also new backpackers in general, so that they have a fun time. They're going to be the king of making you undershoot, and that's fine. Like I said, you much rather undershoot than try to overshoot and be unsuccessful. Listen to them. They have a lot of really good information to offer. They know how many people get rescued out of those parks every year. They know how many people have bad experiences, but they also know who has really good experiences. So their experience working the park is so valuable. Make sure to listen to them, and that's usually the first point of contact that I would recommend. From there, once you have the map and you start looking at all the different trails that you might want to go and visit, where can you go from there once you have an idea of your itinerary? Well, what I would recommend is look on Facebook. Facebook is a fantastic tool to find different Facebook groups of the different trail association or provincial parks, or just, hiking people or backpacking groups. In those groups, if you just kind of write your itinerary, you let them know, hey, I'm a beginner backpacker. I'm looking to do this in this location. Does anybody have experience with it? You're going to find yourself having so many replies back because people are so willing to help on those groups. When you're trying to plan your trip, what are you looking for? Obviously, weather. I highly recommend that you get it at least out of 3 different sources, because for some odd reason, they all have different values. So between the 3 of them, you should have a pretty good idea of what to expect over that weekend trip that you're going on, because going on a backpacking trip when there's a lot of chances of rain compared to no chances of rain makes a big difference in the distance that you can go. So make sure to check the weather obviously before, and then things that you want to think about after that is, how far am I willing to hike? What kind of elevation can I take? Now, if you look online and you do a quick search on, what's the average pace of a beginner backpacker and all that, you're going to find different values, and they're all going to tell you it'll depend on, the elevation gain and the weather, like I said earlier. And honestly, I was looking for a value to give you guys, and I was thinking, man, it varies so much. I don't think there's much value into trying to give you guys a number as to what you guys should try to prep with. I really, really recommend that you follow the offices, what they recommend for a beginner backpacker. You go out, you record your hike so you have that data, and over time you will know that for yourself you hike at a pace of 5 kilometers an hour or of 3 miles an hour, whatever it might be for you. And I think that'll be the best way, trial and error this way. So that's when I say to undershoot. It's really also to build that data, to build that experience, so that you can slowly and over time and safely go on bigger and greater backpacking trip over time. All right, so now we know what to kind of plan for when we're planning. What are we looking for, right? You can't just go hike in the bush and hope to find all the things that you need and be happy with all this. When you're planning a trip, you're looking for a couple of things, and some of those things that you're looking for is your source of water. Are you going to be able to refill your water? Are you going to cross any streams, rivers, lakes? Planning for making sure that you cross river or water points, or maybe you're going to need to hike all of your water. So make sure that you're aware of that. Where are the campsites? Where are the shelters? Because the other thing too is a lot of the different parks will allow you to stealth camp, and they'll give you things like you have to be 150 feet from the trail and you have to be under a certain amount of elevation. But the reality is, off the beaten path of a trail, when you go into the real forest, there's rarely a 10 by 10 flat spot on the ground where you can set up your tent properly. Now, if you're a hammock camper, it's a lot easier in those cases. So aiming for campgrounds and shelter areas where you're going to have appropriate campsites that you can camp at is going to be extremely valuable. I know it's a bit of a dry subject. The next thing I want to do is kind of jump on the computer and kind of show you how I go about planning my trip once I have a decent idea of what I want to do from the map, and once I've talked to people on Facebook groups as well as the office. So let's jump on the computer, and then I'll show you exactly kind of how I look at all of these different things that I was telling you guys about. All right, so welcome to my computer. As you can see, the application of choice for me is certainly Gaia GPS. It is a paid membership application, so I understand that that might not be ideal for everyone. What I'm going to show you guys, though, can be done on a lot of different free applications that'll do a lot of very similar things. The reason why I personally pay for it is that I strongly believe, at the very least, for where I do my backcountry adventures, which is in the northeast of the United States and in Ontario and Quebec in Canada, to me, the maps have had the most details and the application has worked the best for what I use it for. And what's neat about this application, it's obviously a cross-platform. You can use it on your browser, on your phone, on your tablet. It's all going to link together. You can create routes. You can get a lot of cool information. And the trails, like I said earlier, for me at least, the trails are really detailed with all the, like you can see here, the shelters, the campsites, the different privies and the lookouts. And if you click on the map here and there, you're even going to get some information sometimes. Some of the information is rather limited from time to time, but in other cases you might have a lot more information, some pictures to it as well. So very, very cool and valuable tool. And since I spend so much time out in the backcountry, for me that was worth it. I'm gonna basically plan a trip with you guys in the Adirondacks, a classic weekend trip, very simple, very geared for beginners. I've done that trip with beginners countless times. I've been successful every time. The level of fitness obviously needs to be there, in a sense that you need to be able to hike long days. Typically speaking, place to kind of meet up for a lot of the big hikes in the Adirondacks and in the high peak region is certainly Adirondack Lodge, which is located here at Hurt Lake. So let's say we parked here, and the trip will be happening from Friday night to Sunday night. So on Friday night we park here, and what we'll do is you can select this tool here to create a route, and you're going to put a point here, and we're going to make our way down to Marcy Dam. And Marcy Dam is kind of the place where there's a lot of shelters and campsites. So let's say we want to go to this campsite here, and what the application is going to do is automatically kind of pick the best route for you through hiking trails, because here you've selected kind of the routing mode, how you're going to get there. So we selected hiking, and what's neat is this graph down here is extremely valuable, because you're going to get your distance here and your elevation gain, and that's going to be super helpful, especially as you get to know yourself and understand the speed of which you can hike at, as well as the elevation that you can take on yourself. It's going to be extremely valuable over time. So that would be kind of our first day here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that little route here. And we have a color here. Here we can write a route title. So I'm going to write Fry Night, because writing Friday was too long apparently. So and you're going to have, you can edit your route and all that. But for now, let's kind of close that just for a sec, because a couple of things that you want to keep in mind is that, as I was telling you guys earlier, we're looking for campsites, we're looking for shelters, we're looking for water at all time. And as you can see along the trail here, you can see there's the first brook here, there's another one here, there's another one here. So there's no shortage of water in this one. Plus, you start at the campground, at the parking lot up there. You're gonna hopefully start with full water bottles. And down here at Marcy Dam, here it shows that it's a swamp, but it's actually a decent pond or lake as well. If you click on the route that we just created, here we go. So Friday night, you're gonna have your distance here. So now I know from experience that a beginner backpacker will probably run that hike in about an hour and a half. An hour to an hour and a half, depending on the speed, and that's 4.19 kilometers. You can change all that into miles and feet if you want to. It's just I'm used to this because I'm Canadian. But the graph here is interesting because you can kind of see where it's going to get a little harder, right? We know from this graph here about the 3 kilometer mark to this up here about 3.5. You have a bit of a push to get up. We're gaining a decent amount of elevation there. So just these are all the values and the information that you need to be able to to plan properly. So that would be Friday night for me here, and that seems pretty decent. Now for a beginner backpacker, one of the mountains that I've showed that I've hiked a lot with new people in the Adirondacks is certainly Wright Peak here. It's accessible. It's not a super long hike. And what's neat also in this situation is that you could leave a lot of your gear down at your campground. You could leave your tent, you could leave your sleep system, and just kind of leave with a smaller version of your pack and go hike a mountain. And Wright Peak is great because you get a 360 view. It's accessible. Let's go ahead and put in the second day so we're gonna make another route. We're gonna start from that same campground right here. So you select that there, and then it'll give you a different color, which is great. And we're gonna go to Wright Peak right at the top, and it should put everything into, as my computer is loading, there we go. It'll put everything onto the map like this. And then we're gonna do it round trip, obviously. So we're gonna come back here right after. So I'm gonna put basically a third one. And in my experience, sometimes if you try to put it exactly where you had your initial one, it might not work. So let's just put it a little before right here. And you can see the graph here. Obviously we're climbing a mountain and we're coming down the mountain. So let's go ahead and save that. And then we're gonna call this Saturday, obviously. Very simple. Saturday, boom. Let's look at the map here. So if we zoom out a little bit, we're gonna see that we actually have to backtrack a little bit for this trail. And I'm surprised, actually, I'm surprised that it didn't make us take this trail here, because this is accessible. So, but we're gonna take the longest route that it's offering to us, just for the sake of this exercise here. And again, as I'm looking at this hike, I can see, okay, we're crossing the McIntyre Brook here. So we're gonna start full of water here. We're gonna cross here if ever we need a refill, and then it seems like the last place where we're gonna have water before the peak is the famous McIntyre Fall, and that's actually where most people will refill their water for the last time to kind of do the last push here and come all the way back down. And again, this is the kind of knowledge that you get from the office, from Facebook groups. So it's important to know this, because it's not a fun situation to be dehydrated, and especially at the top of these peaks where there's no more trees, so you're exposed to the sun. So it can be a dangerous situation. So make sure that you're always constantly looking for that. So now we have our waterway. We know that the trail is fairly doable because, the office said it. It is an accessible peak, especially if you go with, a lighter pack, because you leave some of your gear at the camp. So now let's look at the graph and see what that means, right? So we have a total of 14.2 kilometers. So, that's for my American friends, that'll be, so 10 kilometers is 6 miles. So 13-mile day with a total elevation gain of 814 meters. So it's a very reasonable hike, to be honest, if you have a certain fitness level. Usually that'll take up and down max 5 hours. That's been my experience, at least in the past. Maybe we're a little fast. So that would be kind of your Saturday day. So again, we've got water, and then we know where we're camping. So that's great. And then what we could do is we could either repeat this Sunday, or for Sunday, just kind of repeat it. So we're going to put another point here, and we're going to go back up to the car right up here. Boom. And we're going to save it. We're going to title this, obviously, Sunday. So now that we know kind of what we want to do here, we already have established our route. We know we have water. We know we have campsite shelters. The distance is fine. The elevation gain seems good. We have confirmation from the parks office, from the Facebook group. So we're pretty sure that this is what we're doing. We can go check out our routes, which our routes is what we kind of establish on the map like we did. And the tracks is, as you hike, you can record your tracks. So you can see here that we have Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday. These were all created dates here of the routes. And one thing that I personally really enjoy doing, and I would highly recommend you guys do this, is we're going to export those. And to do that, actually, we're going to have to go individually. This is one thing I wish they had, that Gaia had, is that being able to export multiple route all at once. Maybe there's a way, I just don't know how to do it. But here, if you select your route, you can export your GPX file of that route, and that'll become handy in a second here. So it's downloading down here. So let's go back, and we're going to repeat the process. All right, so now that we have all 3 of our GPX files exported from, the route that we created, you can go here on Google and you type in My Maps Google, and Google has this feature where you can kind of create maps and upload GPX files. GPX files are a very common file for all GPX devices to use, and I use this My Map feature quite a bit myself. So if we go ahead and we create a new map, you can add the different layers, and you can import directly these different GPX tracks. And what's interesting about this is if you drag it here, and it's actually gonna mark exactly the trail. And then the other thing that I like to do myself is I'll select the terrain version here, and there's a very specific reason why I put it into Google Maps like this. It's because what I end up doing is after I'm done planning my trip through Gaia apps, then I'll go on my phone and download that section of the map and those routes, so I have them for myself. But what I like to do as well is put together a Google map with those GPX files that I'm gonna share with my wife, my parents, maybe some friends that I know that they're very familiar with the Adirondack parks. And the reason why I share this with a handful of people, it's because I always share my trip plan with a few friends and a few people, so that they know exactly what I'm about to do. They know the timeline. I'm going to be gone from that date to that date. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm sleeping. And even in Google Map here, if you zoom in, you can even go fancy and add a bunch, change the colors of everything. So you could select this route here and add a color to it, make it pretty. So that's day 1, for example, and you can change everything. And you can also, if you zoom in, so I know that this is where I was going to be camping, right? So I can add a waypoint right here. Boom. I'm going to call it Camp 1. I can save it, and then that waypoint I can even go fancy on everyone here. And so you can hit style here, and then you could select more icons, and you could camping, I'm assuming. Yeah, there you go. You can find this is where I'm going to be camping. So I usually take the time to kind of set up something like this for the people that I'm going to be sending this trip plan to. And at the end, once I'm done putting it all in here, I can just share it with friends and family, and then they all have it. So if ever something happens, they kind of know what was my plan. They know where I was going, where I was sleeping, and they can activate search and rescue this way, so it'll be a lot easier. This Google Map, My Map thing is not a great way to prep your trip or anything like this. Gaia is really the way to go because you have all the information. But I do appreciate being able to upload all my GPX files and be able to share kind of my trip plan this way, because sharing my GPX files with my dad, for example, he has no idea how that works, but Google Map, he knows how that works. So for him, that makes sense.